Yo everybody, how's it going? I am super excited to share this bass that I've made with you today, which sounds like this. Now, if you hear clipping and all that, it's because of OBS, so I apologize, but the sound should come out clean whenever you guys make this, just as a forewarn. But before I get into how to make this patch, although it is pretty straightforward, I have a couple announcements. First of all, thank you to all of my subscribers. I finally hit 300, and because of you guys who have supported me on Patreon, I've been able to get myself a mic stand. Yes, thank you so much. I don't have to hold a mic with my hand anymore. Yeah, that's really nice. And by the way, I dropped my first EP about a week ago, and if you guys are wondering how to apply these kinds of basses in your tunes, hopefully my music will give you some kind of idea about how I apply them in my own stuff. And down the line I will cover about like put this stuff together, but for now I just enjoy doing like the sound design process. So expect that kind of content coming out. As always, if you guys like this stuff, be sure to give my video a like and subscribe. Feel free to check out my Patreon if you guys are interested in just downloading the patch. But as always, I will walk you through every single step on how to recreate this within your own DAW, as long as you have Serum. I guess you can make it with anything else, but Serum kind of helps because of the routing and processing. So yeah, let's get into the patch. Here is our outlook, and yeah, we'll just go ahead and jump right in, and I'll kind of walk you through what I did. So starting with the sub, you can turn the sub on, make sure that this is on a direct output. This is going to split the processing chain from the effects, so it's going to be an independent sub. That's really good because that will keep your sub solid. Turn the octave down to -1, and then turn the noise oscillator on as well. I think AC hum is the default, I want to say, so keep the level at about 26%. This will come back, make a difference later. I suppose I should turn all of these off and kind of walk through what they sound like individually. So here's what we have right now. It's just a sub with some noise on top. This is going to be our detuning, so we have a unison of 5 voices, and the detuning is kind of even, and you want to make sure to turn the random phase down. This is going to keep everything consistent, and the random phase means that it's always going to start on that line in the middle. If I turn the random phase up, then that means that the sound can start in between any of these. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Yeah. There is an FM going on right here, but I don't use that for this patch. This was just kind of like what I was experimenting with when I design it. If you want to use it, you can, but that's not really what's affecting the sound right now. So here's our checkpoint. Yeah. Next up, we have some hyper dimension. The hyper is not being used. The dimension expander is turned up with the size at here and the mix here. And again, we don't really care about like adding too much stereo right now because we have that solid sub being routed on its own. So you can kind of just tune it to how you like. The next two options that we have are our chorus and phaser. These you won't even really be able to tell or make a difference unless if you overdo it. For me, I kind of hear subtle differences, but these are just, again, stereo effects. Chorus is kind of like a, how do I say, kind of creates these like short delays that give your sound more stereo, and phaser is a bunch of notches that kind of move up and down the frequency spectrum that kind of give it like a wishy-washy sound. But because we have the rate down on 0 here, I'm actually leaving the notches in one spot, and that kind of helps accentuate some of the vocal tones. The chorus rate is at here. I know that I'm covering 2 different effects at once, but these are kind of like arbitrary. You won't even be able to tell. I'll turn these off after all of these. And I guess it makes a little difference. But again, those are optional, so don't worry about like having to have these essential. And again, you can always just kind of copy the settings if you need to. So next up we have our distortion. This is a big part of the sound. The drive and the mix are all the way up. We have a low pass set to post on 191 Hertz with a bandwidth of 2.0, and that is going to make it a sausage. And because we have a little bit of resonance, it's going to help bring back some of that high end from the noise. The next thing that we have is an EQ. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it sounded good when I made it. We have a peak right here, and then a notch, which is on 132 Hertz and 241. So this is the notch on the left side, this is the peak on the right side. And this again is just kind of accentuating the vocal tones or the vocal resonances that we're trying to pull out. You might not be able to tell the difference, but again, like I'm pretty meticulous when I make this kind of stuff, so experiment and try different peaks. See what happens when you boost both, you know, or do whatever. Alright, so the compression is doing a lot as well. I've made sure that this is on multiband and turned up the high end, and then I've also turned up the gain to 15 dB. There we go. And this is what we have. And again, sorry for the clipping, that's from OBS. It shouldn't be doing that much. So the filter is what's going to give us our kind of wub talking. I'm using a band notch 12, and the reason why I have the filter turned on here is because I don't really know how the processing chain works in relation to this. Like, I don't know if this all goes straight into the effects or how that is rearranged, but with this in particular, I know that I can rearrange this wherever in the processing chain, so that's kind of why I have it there, even though it's at the end. That being said, the cutoff and the frequency, which is also the cutoff of the notch, are being modulated by the LFO2, and I've just kind of drawn, I say drawn, but really I've just clicked in this kind of LFO shape. Now, one of the key differences, though, compared to all the other patches that I've made, is that whenever I do a pitch bend and I turn it up, or the rate of the LFO is actually turned up. And the way that I've achieved that is by taking the note and then moving that over here. So essentially we're emulating a sampler by it seeming like the note or the sample, quote unquote, so to speak, is playing faster at a higher pitch. And again, you can kind of tune this to taste however you like, but that being said, this was just kind of like what worked out for me, and of course you can kind of turn this up and down and whatever, but I think it's a neat trick that you can do if you don't feel like resampling. And I think that it sounds really good with those pitch bends. Yeah, that's about it for the patch. Woohoo, high five. Yay. And outside of that, there's just a couple effects that we're using, kind of expand all these. The first is a notch. This is just kind of over all of the other sounds, and it's neat because it makes it twist a little bit more. It sounds pretty neat. You'll have to kind of, and again, you'll kind of have to like listen to this on your own to kind of tell the differences, because unless if you spend a lot of time making these basses, then you won't even notice the difference, but it's the little things that matter. The little things, you know? Alright, next up I have a utility. And the only thing that I'm doing with this is putting the bass in mono, and that's just kind of making sure that our bass from, or our sub from here is solidified. It should be fine, but I just do that just in case, because if you notice, these two are playing in the same octave, so that means that even though I have a direct output for this sub going on, there's still going to be some phase cancellation that happens in between the two. So using that utility and putting that in mono is going to make sure that my sub is in fact solid. I understand if that's kind of confusing, but give it a try for yourself and you'll see the difference. Next thing that I have is an OTT. I've turned up the highs a little bit and kept on about 66%, and that's pretty much that. We have a saturator next that's fattening up the sound. If you have like sausage fattener or something, then you can be cool and use that. I'm not that cool, so I use saturator. But I have this on a soft sine with the soft clip turned on. This is just pumping out at 5.14 decibels. And then finally, as usual, we have our Fabfilter Pro L, and this is just being cranked up here. What I want you guys to pay attention to up here is how this is kind of flattening the sound out. And what this is going to do is kind of keep all the levels at a relatively consistent rate. There's another line right here. I'm going to play the sample again. And you can see right here along these lines that the sound stays relatively consistent. So that's a good reason to use a limiter or compressor whenever you guys are doing bass related stuff. It's okay if you have dips, but you want to avoid the peaks because it's going to be much more difficult to mix if you have lots of peaks. But yeah, don't overdo it. So yeah, that's pretty much the patch, guys. It's really neat. You can resample if you want, but what I'd recommend is leaving this as a patch, then duplicating this, and then having a solid sub where this is just like this. So that way you can use this to play your bass line, and then you can use this as like your accent or kind of like bounce out samples of various measures, and it makes it more fun too because you can literally just set this to record and then start doing like pitch bends and all that, and then throw it in a drum beat. That's basically it. Thank you guys so much for watching my content, and feel free to leave questions, comments, observations in the comment section. But for now, happy producing.